Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Believe in best.
Coming up tonight, the National Security Minister admits that lockdowns help lower crime. Meanwhile, a vaccine education campaign is set to launch, and a virtual school grateful for the help it received. Welcome to Our News, and thanks for joining us. I'm Jared Higgs. Topping news tonight, Minister of National Security Marvin Dames acknowledged that lockdowns helped decrease crime in 2020. It comes following Dames' defense of the police commissioner, who insisted it was the work of officers that brought crime levels down during the pandemic year.
We can argue back and forth whether, some of the lockdown and the adjustments had an impact on crime. It may have, okay? And I beg to say it probably did.
Dames made the comments after he was asked if the state of emergency was extended in order to help keep crime low. While he acknowledged that the lockdowns would have had some impact on crime, he says there aren't studies available to prove it. He says in other countries like the United States, crime increased.
Maybe not to the extent but that some people are seeming to suggest, because if that is the case, then you would see the same in other places. But instead, you saw increased crime, and crime continued to increase in the United States and in other developed countries and in some of our regional countries, despite the fact that we're going through these adjustments.
Dames defended the extension of the state of emergency, saying the situation in other countries is a driving force behind government extending it. The controversial decision means government can continue to impose curfew and lockdowns during that time. Dames says they want to be able to react quickly enough if the country's health situation declines.
Just in the event that we have another outbreak and we need to escalate. What's happening here is proper planning. It doesn't mean anything. Right now we're at a place where we are considered the envy of the world.
Parliamentarians voted to extend the state of emergency earlier this week. A state of emergency was first declared back in March 2020. The Bahamas has gone through 2 waves of the virus during the pandemic. The second wave was particularly vicious, with more than 150 people dying of COVID-19 during that time. Dames says government is also trying to protect the economy.
And if we don't try to demonstrate to the world that we're ready, and tourism is our business, all right, no one's going to want to come if we are, overrun with COVID.
With the Minister administration promising to have the COVID-19 vaccine in country soon, Health Minister Renward Wells says his ministry will soon begin a vaccination educational campaign.
We do have a PR campaign, a public relations campaign that the ministry will be engaging in the coming weeks to be able to educate the Bahamian people on the vaccines and the ministry's position as to how we're going to deploy the vaccine throughout the country to give the Bahamian people a greater understanding. We would have already begun to do some of that just in our press conferences and in our press releases.
Wells said earlier this month that the government hopes to have a COVID-19 vaccine available in the Bahamas before the end of the first quarter of 2021. Wells said Cabinet has approved the National COVID-19 Vaccine Strategic Plan. However, that plan has not been released to the public. He added the Prime Minister has established a COVID-19 Vaccine National Consultative Committee to safely introduce the vaccine in the Bahamas.
Obviously, there are lots of information out there in the public sphere, in the social media sphere, from WhatsApp to Instagram to Twitter, about those who are pro-vaccine and those who are anti-vacciners. And so there's already a lot of information out there, some true, some not so true. But the Ministry of Health will be speaking to the Bahamian people at another level about vaccines and the benefit of the Bahamian people being vaccinated, in particularly for COVID-19 going forward, so that we can continue to open the country and continue our economic growth.
Wells said the government is seeking to secure a vaccine through the World Health Organization. He also noted that the government is keeping its options open and looking at its connections directly with distributors of the approved vaccines. Pan American Health Organization Director Dr. Carissa Etienne calling for the public health measures against the spread of COVID-19 to be redoubled while countries in the region are awaiting vaccines. George O'Bain reports.
During PAHO's weekly press briefing, the PAHO director raised concerns about countries such as Brazil and Mexico, which are currently experiencing a spike in COVID-19 cases. Over 1 million people have died from COVID-19 in the Americas, prompting Edian's calls for countries in this region to redouble COVID-19 safety efforts. Edian's comments come as the government passed a resolution to extend the state of emergency to May 23rd.
This pandemic has brought a triple crisis throughout our region, as it has ravaged our health systems, fractured our social protection, and destabilized our economies. The loss of 1 million people from this virus should serve as an urgent call that we must do more to protect ourselves and each other from getting sick. This includes strong calls to action to reinforce the public health measures that are needed now in each of the places that are seeing outbreaks.
The extension authorizes the competent authority to continue existing emergency measures to mitigate the spread of the potentially deadly virus. Edian says it's too early for countries to let their guard down.
We need to redouble our efforts to reduce the number of new cases of COVID-19 and subsequent deaths. For example, Chile has lowered the transmission curve by implementing a successful health residency strategy that provides temporary housing for people diagnosed with COVID-19, as well as close contacts and suspects or probable cases who cannot quarantine effectively at home.
Edian also called for proper tracking of vaccinations once they arrive in country. The PAHO director insisted that broad access to vaccines represents the way out of this pandemic, which has raged for nearly a year.
As COVID vaccines are rolled out over the coming months, we need health systems to track vaccinations and to prioritize those most at risk of severe illness, like our healthcare workers and like the elderly, so we can reduce the demand on our hospitals. We owe a great debt to our frontline health workers. So I've been pleased to see that in countries where vaccinations are underway, doses are being prioritized for healthcare workers.
Reporting for our News Weekend Edition, I'm Georgio Bain.
Still to come on our news, officials record a grim pandemic milestone, plus how to detect cervical cancer. Stay with us.
Basketball is back, baby, and so is NBA League Pass, only with Rev Trio. Sign up for Rev Trio today and enjoy NBA League Pass absolutely free, along with incredible prizes including a brand new 50-inch smart TV, NBA gear, and more. With tons of prizes and gear, signing up for Trio is the best on and off-court move this year. Just call 601-8992 or visit www.rev.bs/promotions/trio. Sign up for Rev Trio today and enjoy NBA League Pass absolutely free.
The COVID-19 pandemic reaching grim milestones this week, recording 100 million cases since the pandemic began. That according to the World Health Organization. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus today addressed the media earlier this week on the pandemic.
Tomorrow marks 1 year since I declared a public health emergency of international concern over the outbreak of novel coronavirus, the highest level of alarm under international law. At the time, there were fewer than 100 cases of the disease we now call COVID-19, and no deaths outside China.
Now, the Director General says more cases have been reported in the past 2 weeks than during the first 6 months of the pandemic. But he notes that the vaccine offers a window of opportunity and countries around the world must not squander it.
The pandemic has exposed and exploited the inequalities of our world. There is now real danger that the very tools that could help to end the pandemic, vaccines, may exacerbate those same inequalities.
With January observed as Cervical Cancer Awareness Month, our news spoke with Dr. Troy Gatliff, gynecologic oncologist at the Miami Cancer Institute in South Florida. According to Gatliff, the first step in the fight against cervical cancer is early detection.
The most important issue for, I think, everyone to understand is that the causative agent of cervical cancer is human papillomavirus. I think this is now well known and understood by most folks, but there's still several people in our own community that really don't get that this is a virally transmitted infectious disease that occurs as a result of human sexual contact. So by the age of 21 is a reasonable guideline.
While screening is important, some stages of cervical cancer can go undetected.
A stage 1 cancer is still confined to the cervix. A stage 2 cancer has spread slightly outside of the cervix into the nearby tissue. A stage 3 cancer has grown way out of the cervix and is now beginning to affect the side walls of the pelvis. And a stage 4 cancer has either grown into the rectum or the bowel below, the bladder above, or has metastasized distantly.
So what can women do? According to Gatliff, the first step is to pay attention to your body.
If you start having unusual bleeding, unusual discharge, pelvic pain, don't put that off. Go and see your gynecologist and be checked.
The second step is to keep current with pap smears.
Most gynecologic providers can obtain a pap smear in under a minute. It really is a very, very quick exam. Of course, it is an invasive exam. Of course, it is an uncomfortable exam. It should never be a painful exam. And really and truly, a minute, 90 seconds in stirrups with a quick brush of the outside of the cervix could really, really prevent cervical cancer from really ever taking another Bahamian life.
When our news comes back from the break, support pours in for a virtual school. We've got the story.
Hey Rev customer, did you know that you can change and add multiple credit or debit cards to your online payment? Simply log into my.rev.bs, sign into your My account, click Pay Now, then enter your card details, and click Save to File. It's that simple. We are committed to providing you with excellent, reliable service no matter what. Stay connected with Rev, anywhere, anytime.
A virtual school that was featured on Our News is grateful for the outpouring of donations it received after the story aired. With children still mostly learning at home, this community effort was recognized for its contribution during the pandemic.
Oh my gosh, the reaction was overwhelming. It was really supportive.
That was Linda Umbrister's reaction to the outpouring of help she received after telling the story of the virtual classroom she runs for students in Cool Acres Haitian Village.
A lot of positive feedback, a lot of comments, a lot of persons reach out to me to get the children devices.
Besides devices, donors also gave money, furniture, pizza, and free internet access.
Students, they're still on their cell phones, and some of the devices are cracked or not really usable, so they'll be able to access their classroom better.
When we first visited Umbrister School, some of the students still had challenges accessing devices. Some of the desks and chairs needed a bit of TLC too, but upon seeing the story, many reached out. Umbrister recently returned to work herself and has an assistant helping her. City and the IOM were just a few of the sponsors who donated.
Today, I'm grateful, IOM Bahamas, we're grateful to have partnered with Candy Gibson and her organization, FOAM. We gave her a batch, and out of that batch and finding out about this operation going on here, she decided that she would take some from hers and to hand over and give away here.
And this young lady has done the best she can with what she have, which is awesome. So I would tell persons to please come on down. Let us just not stop at just giving them devices, but also come and just support into her ministry, what she's doing right now.
Children in the Bahamas have mostly been learning virtually since the pandemic's inception back in March 2020. While a small amount of students have been able to return to the classroom, most children in the public school system are still learning remotely. Umbrister says the kids are better positioned for learning now, but no doubt they miss the classroom.
Most of the children, they're still excited. They do have their challenges with accessing the classrooms, but if they're not able to come here, if they're home and the parent can assist, then the parent assist them as best as possible.
Police officers recognized for their hard work That's coming up when our news returns.
Happy Foods, Happy Foods, 242, 242, Happy Foods, 242, food galore just for you. Happy Food, 242, food galore just for you. This ain't no talking show, it's an eating show. Sasha Laurel is the host of Happy Foods, 242, food galore just for you. Happy Foods, 242, food galore.
Junior police officers at the South Central Division, or Grove Police Station, were recognized by the superiors for their performance during 2020. Several officers were acknowledged for exemplary work during Hurricane Dorian and the pandemic.
This is it's a very difficult job, and especially what would have transpired over the last 2 years in this country. You know, so much is demanded of our law enforcement officers, and they're usually at the end of lots of criticisms and blame. And it's always good when you can be recognized, not only by the citizenry, but when you can be recognized by your senior officers.
Officers were awarded for Reserve Sergeant of the Year, Employee of the Year, Most Improved Officer, and other awards. The officers served the constituencies of St. Barnabas, Mount Moriah, and Engliston. Minister of National Security Marvin Dame says he can relate to the challenges they face on a day-to-day basis. Even more is that the officers had to help respond to Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic.
I've served in law enforcement, and one of the things I recognize is that we work around the clock, and sometimes, you know, the pressures and the stresses, and you're demanding so much from the rank and file that you sometimes you tend to forget that, you know, there is need for pause and recognition. And so this is good, and especially after the results of last year, where you have serious crimes down. I mean, at numbers that we haven't seen in 15 years. This is good.
Thank you for joining us for Our News Tonight. To catch our news on the go, download the RevGo Play app. On behalf of the entire newsroom, I'm Jared Higgs. Have a beautiful evening, Bahamas.